and welcome. I'm Antonina Antosha and you are watching Head to Head on uatv. The law of Ukraine on the peculiarities of the state policy on ensuring Ukraine's state sovereignty over temporarily occupied territories in Donetsk and Luhansk regions came into force on February 24th. It's already been called a law of reintegration, and it provides the legal basis for Ukraine to protect its land and its people in accordance with constitution and international laws. How will this law be implemented, and what else is on the agenda of Ukrainian parliament? To discuss this, we're joined in the studio today by Oleksiy Honcharenko, a Ukrainian MP. Hello, Oleksiy, and thank you for coming.
Hi, thank you very much.
So coming back to that law that is called a reintegration law, what are the main peculiarities of that law? Why is Ukraine ending up in a win-win position after implementing that law?
Why do we need this law? Because now Ukraine, unfortunately, is object of hybrid aggression from the Russian Federation.
Mm-hmm.
And before this hybrid aggression, Ukraine, in our laws, we didn't have the form of answer on this hybrid aggression, because we had only anti-terroristic operation.
Right, we didn't even have the name of the war.
Absolutely.
We had an anti-terroristic operation, and Russia was not an aggressor. Russia appeared to be a side in the conflict that actually worked on resolving the conflict, which is not true, obviously. So now we have the law,
And now we have the answer on these peculiarities of this hybrid aggression from the Russian Federation, which is not the big war like it was in the times of World War II or World War I, but it's not certainly an anti-terroristic operation because it's much bigger and much more complicated. So today we have the instrument how to answer the aggressor. First thing we called the aggressor.
An aggressor.
We tell that the Russian Federation is aggressor, that it occupied territories in Donetsk and Luhansk regions, like Crimea, which is annexated by Russian Federation. We tell that in accordance to the international law, all the situation in the occupied territories is the responsibility of the aggressor, and also things about social defense of people who live there, health, social insurance, education, everything, because it says to us international law that aggressor is responsible for what is going on the occupied territory.
What about business?
No.
How can Ukraine deal with those business partners, coming from abroad, that are operating in the Donbass or on the territory of the annexed Crimea? Because clearly Ukraine has obligations to those business partners. And now, since we're in the state of war, we are not fulfilling those obligations, obviously. How does the law change that, since we now have an aggression?
Now we have an answer for this, because in law it is said that Ukraine is not responsible for what is going on this territory. And if you mean that, for example, investor built a factory in the Donetsk and Luhansk region, and now this factory is destroyed or cannot be operated by the investor, it's not a question to Ukraine, it's a question to aggressor, to Russian Federation. This is the answer for the moment. But from the second point of view, we say that all the property questions and all owners of property in these regions are the owners. No difference what these fake powers, these marionette regimes in Donetsk and Luhansk region, what documents, so-called documents, they issue, no difference. Who were the owners, for example, of the apartment or the factory or the land for the moment of beginning of occupation of the territory is the owner for Ukraine and for the whole world. So when we will deoccupy this territory, all the owners will receive their property back from the Ukrainian state.
Okay, what about private persons? Because de facto authorities have already issued a number of documents for people who live in the occupied territories, like passports or certificates.
All these documents are not documents. This is a zero. Absolutely, from juridical point of view, it's nothing, and we say this in this law because only documents which are issued by official Ukrainian government are real and can give any possibilities for the owners on our territory. And Donetsk and Luhansk regions are the territory of Ukraine.
What about Crimea? Is it still officially
absolutely the same situation with Crimea. Now we have in Donetsk and Luhansk region and Crimea, what is the difference? The difference difference is that Crimea, Russia, announced that it is their territory, so it is annexated, not only occupied, but annexated, absolutely illegally, like the whole world.
Well, annexation is an illegal progress in itself.
And certainly, and all this is a huge violation of international law. But Donetsk and Luhansk region, Russia says that there are no our forces there. Certainly, this is not true, and the whole world knows that this territory is occupied by Russian Federation. And now Ukraine, as the state, also says that this territory is occupied. So there is no difference from the point of view of law between Crimea, annexated Crimea, and occupied territories in Donetsk and Luhansk regions.
And does the law actually state the date that is known as the beginning of the Russian aggression on the occupied territories? Do we have the certain date now?
The point is that according to the law, the situation can be changed, because different parts of Donetsk and Lugansk regions were occupied in different dates.
Yeah.
There is no one date like it was in Crimea, for example, where there was one date when on the whole territory of Crimean Peninsula, Russian forces, special forces, and Russian army appeared, and the occupation and then annexation began. In Donetsk and Lugansk region, there is a difference because different parts were occupied in different times. And according to the law, it is a question to the Ukrainian government, which issue the special law of the government, which says about at what time and what territories exactly are occupied, because not the whole Donetsk and Lugansk regions fortunately are occupied. Part of this territory was liberated by Ukrainian army and Ukrainian special forces in 2014. Part of this was occupied in 2015 after the first Minsk agreement. Part of it was occupied even in next years, even after the second Minsk agreement. So there is a difference. There is a difference between different parts of Donetsk and Lugansk region.
What about the people who still live in the occupied territories, whose rights are constantly being violated? Who is going to be held responsible for that?
Responsible for this is aggressor. Certainly, like one more time, according to the international law, it's not Ukrainian idea, it's absolutely world practice that aggressor is responsible for everything what is going on the occupied territory, but also Ukraine, certainly. If we have possibility, for example, today we pay pensions and social insurance for the people who lived even in occupied territory, but if they come out of the occupied territory to the unoccupied territory of Donetsk and Lugansk or any other part of Ukraine, they can receive their social insurance, their pensions, and other money which they need to receive according to the Ukrainian law. But certainly we cannot do this on the occupied territory because we have no control there, but we can do this on our territory, and we do this.
And what about the people who are held captive in the annexed Crimea or even in the Russian territories, but who are initially residents of Ukraine?
This is not a question of this law, but this is a real problem. We have a number of these people. You know that recently, finally, after several years of negotiations without any release of captives, finally, near the New Year, there was a change between Ukraine and Russia, and a number of our people and our citizens, not only soldiers and officers, but also just absolutely ordinary people who were captured by Russia and by their bandits who are now called so-called president or other representatives of power in these regions. So they were finally liberated. But even after this, there is a number of people who are still in the prison. We know some of the names are well known in the whole world. For example, Mr. Sentsov, who is a famous director, film director, who is now in the prison in Russia. Mr. Sushenko, who is Ukrainian journalist, your colleague who worked in Paris. And as I know, even French authorities today are doing a lot of to set him free. And we hope that we will see them in the nearest future in Ukraine, free and healthy. But certainly this is a big problem. Also, I want to remind you that this question was in the Minsk agreements, number 1 and number 2, and it was an obligation of Russia and their bandits to liberate all these people. But unfortunately, for the moment, it is not done. And we hope for the help of our colleagues all over the world to put a pressure on Russia, on Putin, to make them free these people.
Okay, according to this law, before adopting this law, we had an anti-terrorist operation in the occupied territories.
Yeah. Now it is finished.
And now it's finished, and we do have a full-scale war with a perfectly drawn aggressor. In the military sense, how does it change our protection process from the aggressor?
In a military sense, now it is a big step forward, because now we will have united headquarters, which then the head of this headquarters will be the number 1 person for all army people, for all people who have guns from Ukrainian side. I mean, our army, our special forces, our national guards. So all people now will be under one command, and this is very important for us, certainly. I just want to say one more thing. You are telling about full-scale war. No, because in Ukrainian law we have also an answer for full-scale war. It was before. It is called special status of the whole country. It is like a situation when the Parliament of Ukraine and the President of Ukraine, we say that we are in war with some country, and this is absolutely special status of everything. For example, media stopped, any political activities is stopped, no elections, like in all countries of the world. But what we didn't have the answer for the hybrid aggression, when it is not a full-scale war, but it is not an anti-terroristic operation. Now we have this instrument, and this law is about this. So now we are saying that anti-terroristic operation certainly is finished, but now we have an operation about the insurance of Ukraine's sovereignty over the temporarily occupied parts of Donetsk and Luhansk regions.
And shortly, what do we need to do to deoccupy Donbass and get Crimea back to Ukraine?
A Ukrainian answer is political and diplomatic answer. We don't want to have a force. We don't want to use a force to liberate our territories, because we understand how many people will be killed during this. So it is our right to use a force. But for the moment, and we understand that Russia is a nuclear power with the biggest army in the continental Europe. So now we say that our answer is political, first of all, and diplomatic, and sanctions against Russian Federation, which are very important and which are really influencing Putin's regime very much, and we need to keep the sanctions, even to make them stronger. And this is our answer to what will be next. So we hope that these sanctions and the pressure of the whole world on Russian regime will force them to liberate Ukrainian territories.
Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing this
information. Thank you very much for your invitation.
That was Oleksiy Honcharenko. He's a member of Parliament of Ukraine. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned with UATV.